Hello everyone. I'll discuss with you today about the changing role of online journalism. Uh, Here I'll focus on the changing nature of gatekeeping, agenda setting theory, cultivation theory, and the shift from gatekeeping and gatewatching. So here we begin. Uh, Gatekeeping theory appeared in communication studies almost 6 decades ago. The term was first introduced by social psychologist Kurt Lewin in his study of people's food habits. Lewin pointed out that the decisions on what should reach the family table and what should not were made in certain areas of food channels extending from the market or kitchen garden to the table. He termed these areas as gates. Lewin noted that the same was true for the movement of news items through communication channels. The gate sections were controlled either by rules which he considered impartial or by gatekeepers, that is, people in power. In 1949, D.M. White studied the last gate for wire service, that is news agency, an item received at a US newspaper, namely the wire editor. He was responsible for selecting some of these stories for publication while discarding the rest. White found that the news that reached the readers was highly subjective, based on the gatekeeper's own set of experiences, attitudes, and expectations. Then we see sociologist Warren Breed shifted the focus from the individual to the institutional level with his paper Social Control in the Newsroom, a functional analysis in 1955. His conclusion was that the news that reached readers was saved by the publisher and the journalist professional peer group because the journalist received his rewards not from readers but from his colleagues and superiors. Subsequent empirical studies by large number of researchers have identified a hierarchy of forces which shape media content. It works as a concentric circles where there is ideological level, extramedia level, organization level, media routines level, and then in the innermost level, which is individual level. So the individual journalist is located in the innermost of concentric circles and acts as a conduit for influences from various levels to shape the content that finally reaches the audience. The forces range from personal, that is at individual level, through institutional, that is at media, routine, organization and extramedia level, to social, that is the ideology. So, gatekeeping theory appeared in the USA in the late 1940s. The information environment was then marked by a scarcity as the public had to depend on newspapers and the radio for information. Television had a minor role, if any. It was still very young in the USA and non existent in countries like India. As a result, mainstream media organizations were in a position to control the flow of information to the public, but the advent of the web, with billions of pages providing information on every conceivable subject and to anyone with access to the net, has created an information glut. Moreover, while citizens had been more and less passive receivers or consumers of information, they have become active seekers of information because of the nature of web or net technologies. Many consumers have also become information providers through such practices such as blogging, blogging, that is mobile blogging, and participatory journalism. They take advantage of easy to use and increasingly affordable technologies of information production, packaging and distribution, such as desktop and laptop computers with wired and wireless internet access, lightweight camcorders, and mobile camera phones like stills and video. The gates are not located with the information providers, ultimately with anyone who publishes a website with potentially newsworthy information, as well as with the end user who is navigating the web constantly act as their own gatekeepers, but no longer necessarily with the news media organization. Then we see that there is a shift from gatekeeping to gatewatching. The abundance of information on the web, as we have seen, many a time means the abundance of useless and misleading or even false information. Users or consumers do want someone to direct them to reliable sources of information and perhaps to aggregate such information for them. This activity can no longer take the form of gatekeeping in the style of the older media, as the concept of news itself has to change in the online environment. Another reason for a change in the gate paradigm is the fact that the physical capacity of the media to carry information arising from their technical and commercial characteristics has changed. One aspect of the gatekeeping function in the print and broadcast media is the fitting of available information into the news whole. In print, the amount of information that can be conveyed to the reader is limited by the space left after accommodating advertisement, while time is the limiting factor in broadcast. Since the low-cost digital memory makes it possible to store and carry virtually unlimited amounts of information, the online media have no such technical constraints on space or time, though limited audience attention is an issue that has to be addressed by communication professionals. So these two considerations have changed the gatekeeping function to one of the gate watching. In See, the primary responsibility of online news operations is not to report objectively and impartially and to tailor their work to a fixed amount of column inches or airtime, but to evaluate the reliability of available information. This becomes a critical task due to the abundance of potential news sources on the web. In the gatekeeping model, the activity of preparing a story is focused on summarizing information gathered from various news sources. The finished story is then posited as the primary source of information, replacing the sources. Gatewatching marks a shift from this to a concern with leading the reader or user to the sources themselves as primary sources. In this case, the online journalist's own piece is positioned merely as a key node connecting the reader to these primary sources of information, and its status changes to that of secondary source. Several advantages follow from this shift from gatekeeping to gatewatching, since readers are able to explore source material directly. Stories can be more informative. The news gathering process becomes more transparent, and the likelihood of readers being influenced by the journalist's personal bias is also reduced, and the speed of news publishing increases, since stories can be posted as soon as source information is found on the web without necessarily waiting for reporters to file their stories. Moreover, news work becomes more inclusive as gate watching can be performed by anyone with online research skills. The possession of journalistic skills is not essential for this purpose. Then we see that in the online environment, readers in fact have to contend not only with the traditional media gatekeepers like reporters and editors, but also with some who are outside media organizations. Increasingly, in many parts of the world, many libraries and colleges have begun to restrict internet access with the help of filtering softwares such as Surfwatch, Cyber Patrol, NetNanny, and CyberSeeker. Uh, this is in response to the panic that has been caused by the presence of pornographic and hate sites on the net. There are efforts, despite all the efforts, we see that readers at large do not seem to be ready yet for an information order without gatekeepers. And we also see that the continued popularity of news sites, perhaps next only to that of search engines, is the reason. The popularity of nobots, which are small piece of softwares that can be personalized in such a way as to continuously search the web for material matching the user's interest and sending this to the user. In this case, these programs act as gatekeepers. Then we see how portals and internet service providers control access to sources of information to users. Portal and service providers are also able to gain an editorial hold on consumers by offering unique, often sanitized views of the world. For instance, by providing links to information offered by other sites, portal and internet service providers sites like Yahoo, FreeServe, and American Online control access to those sources of information. The larger internet service providers provide their own news packages as well as pages of useful information on cities and communities, weather, shopping, entertainment, and etc. This too amounts to gatekeeping. Through cookies and other feedback, portal providers know their customers intimately. They control the first layer of links into the outside world, and increasingly, many consumers may click beyond the first layer. For those consumers, the ISPs, internet service providers, or their editors have taken over the role of gatekeeper, once occupied by news editors of print and broadcast media. They are able to shape their customers' world by foregrounding certain sites, censoring others, and adding a portfolio of pop-up information and advertisement very specifically tailored to individual customers' taste. Then we look at the change and continuity in journalism. Uh, Mainstream news organization, as we see, are struggling to apply old-fashioned news standard to the web, but are discovering it is not easy to translate the virtues of accuracy, balance, and clarity to a medium where the advantages of speed and timeliness prevail. The technology of internet has given journalism the tools for performing its traditional watchdog function in a more comprehensive way than before. The net allows reporters to probe deeper and more efficiently for information. The ability to search documents, find background material and historical context, and identify authoritative sources are important addition to reporters' toolbox. internet has introduced fundamentally different culture built on interactivity, fewer rules, and fewer limits. Speed and timeliness were once critical for newspapers. News agencies vied for one another to be the first to provide important stories which should appear in newspapers. When television arrived on the media scene, its immediacy left the printed press far behind. Uh, So we see that the advent of web has led to collision between the traditional standards of newspaper with other values such as freedom, irreverence, advocacy, and attitude. Online journalists feel that the Olympian tones of the print media, the superiority of print media, are not appropriate for the online environment. There is a richness to the .com coverage, but an important question that needs to be answered is whether such richness is compatible with the high standard of journalism. Can the freewheeling, provocative nature of web adapt to a culture whose traditions have been shaped by a more sober, structured medium? Um, So we see that since immediacy is one of the major characteristics of the internet as a news medium, online news can be and is often updated round the clock, and there is therefore no such things as news cycle. Some news sites tend to sacrifice rigorous editing and fact checking for sake of immediacy. On the other hand, some ad hoc alternative journalism sites actually employ stricter standards than the mainstream media because of their hostility towards the way the latter operate. Uh, how news has changed with the advent of online journalism. The changes in the newsroom culture, technology, and other factors in the online initiatives uh, of newspapers and TV channels are multiple and complex. News is a culturally constructed category. Social histories of praise have thrown light on institutional and technological factors shaping the news over 2 centuries, and ethnographic studies of news production have uncovered contingent factors that influence the reporting of current events. So, with the advent of new media tools, we can discern certain major changes in news production. It's shaping by more numerically and qualitatively diverse group of actors, which increases the importance of coordination among these groups. This changes the news from being overwhelmingly journalist centered, monologue type, uh, to something that is increasingly audience centered and part of the multiple conversation. In the case of the online edition of traditional media, the dynamics of two newsrooms, the online one and its print and broadcast counterparts, and their interactions may shape the news. Moreover, the advertising and marketing departments may influence the news via topic selection and budget allocation more tellingly than is usual in print newspapers. So, this could strengthen the trend towards market driven journalism, and that has been growing since 1980s. So we see that the technical and design personnel also appear to influence the news through the use of multimedia, interactive tools, and the greater importance given to the visual interface as an integral part of the storytelling activity. Users to seem to shape the news, such things as what should be considered newsworthy and how it should be covered by voicing their opinions in forums, chat rooms, and other sections within the news sites and linking these pages to other sites such as those of advocacy groups through their personal blog sites. Um, so Next, we see that user-centeredness of news in the online environment, which could actually deepen the civic and public journalism movement. I will discuss about civic and public journalism in later class. So see the increased influence of the marketing and advertising department, which are usually sensitive to the preferences and needs of customers, may also add to user-centeredness of news online. Uh, then we look at the shift in agenda setting theory and cultivation theory. Uh, Closely related to gatekeeping function, indeed following from it is the agenda setting function. It refers to the way media wittingly or unwittingly structure public debate and awareness and focus public attention on a defined and limited set of issues while ignoring others. This is the result of choices made by gatekeepers about the range of opinions, symbols, questions, and other elements that are acceptable as elements to be included for the construction of a given story. Since readers are free to access sites representing every conceivable stage of opinion, irrespective of the choices made by gatekeepers or gatewatchers, the agenda setting power of media is somewhat diminished in the online environment. The crucial factor in agenda setting is the way in which different issues, opinions, symbols, and questions are ranked in terms of legitimacy and priority. This relates to the construction of social reality for the audience and therefore the ideological power of the media. Any erosion of the agenda setting ability then means an erosion of the ideological power of the media. Once again, we can see why many news websites or sites try to keep readers confined to their own stories rather than helping them to find additional sources of information by providing external links. A fundamental assumption of agenda setting theory is that people get their news from a finite number of news sources or outlets. Furthermore, because news is selected by professional gatekeepers who operate under similar news values, the media agenda is thought to be uniform across those few outlets, at least on the national level. However, as the number of news outlets increases, the number of news consumers for any particular outlet decreases. The idea of a unified media agenda becomes problematic. For example, measuring the media agenda, which is now accomplished through content analysis of major news outlets, will become particularly challenging as the available sources of news expand. As in place of a collectively shared agenda, fragmented and competing media agendas and therefore public agendas will emerge. Measuring the public agenda will be equally problematic as people filter and personalize their news using new media technologies. For example, Negroponte's daily me concept, whereby new technologies are programmed to automatically select news and other media content that fit individual users' taste and political perspectives will make agreements among respondents' answers to the pollsters. Through the daily me concept, the new media will allow people to isolate themselves from the larger public discourse and in the process undermine the very notion of a large public discourse. The result may be that the kind of widespread collective action seen in the past may not be possible in the future. The problem is that the public will not be able to come together over common issues because there will not be any issues that they share in common. New communication technologies may help in combating the negative aspects of agenda setting, specifically the interactive or two-way communication capacity and overall increased information flow associated with new technologies may give more power to people whose agendas would not normally be reported in the major mass media. Also, media communication enables people to not only set their own media agendas but to influence other issues agendas by helping them locate and contact people who care about similar issues. So, the new media may also give people more power to set the policy agenda through direct electronic access to their political representatives and particularly through new opportunities for grassroots organizing with interested others. In addition, the availability of competing news interpretations or frames on the internet may help audiences better understand issues, although this will depend on their motivation to seek out multiple sources of news, which may be low. However, if these possibilities are realized, the key problem for agenda setting theory will change from what issues the media tell people to think about to what issues people tell the media they want to think about. Then we will look at the cultivation theory, which actually rests on the assumption that mass media content forms a coherent system, a worldview that is limited to certain themes, as for example, violence, due to economic constraints such as the use of lowest common denominator programming to appeal to a mass audience. However, this assumption may break down with the new media as scarcity disappears and as content becomes increasingly diversified and when mass audiences shrink in size for any given channels and become more selective. So, in cultivation terms, the ability of the media to homogenize or mainstream viewers to a single worldview may decline because so many different worldviews are increasingly available. Some scholars have argued that the greater diversity of content and the user control afforded by new communication technologies spell the end of cultivation theory to the extent that the new media facilitate exposure to a multiplicity of truly diverse content rather than simply extend the reach of traditional media message. They will likely to lead to reduced cultivation effects. However, the end of media's ability to mainstream audiences to a common symbolic environment doesn't necessarily mean the end of cultivation theory. Instead, as many worldviews are disseminated through new media, cultivation theory may shift towards a vision in which individuals are cultivated to a specialized worldviews of their own choosing. The new media's power to cultivate these self-selected worlds may be stronger because of the resonance, which is the idea that cultivation effects may not be boosted for those whose everyday reality matches the mediated reality to which they are exposed to. that is with the narrowcasting and better ability to select and filter content. Audiences for new media will likely to opt for content that is consistent with their pre-existing ideas and prejudices, thus allowing them to match their media experience to their own views with greater precision than ever before possible. Because of this, people will be able to live in a cocoon of self reinforcing media enhanced by like minded others who they have found online. Although the idea of media users being cultivated to a specific worldviews that they chose for themselves is not inherently dangerous, some of those views may even be scarier and more violent than that of the broadcast television. Extreme perspective from hate groups to pedophilia are thriving on the internet where conventional social restraints on the expression of unpopular opinions are eliminated. For this reason, it has been suggested that the new media are bringing the end of the spiral of silence as well. These conditions give new opportunities for once disparate groups to grow into loud minorities who may feel empowered by the social support of extreme but similarly inclined others. If new media technologies shift power from elite group to a greater proportion of media users, and particularly if media producers and receivers do become interchangeable, problems such as media-induced hegemony and democratic access to the media will be less pressing. However, critical theorists may point out that the history of every technology is towards greater centralized control by groups who are already in power, and the internet is no exception. Companies with familiar logos, large employee roles, and profuse computing powers are already lining up to take control of cyberspace, as the recent American Online and Time Warner merger illustrates. A real problem for anyone producing content in the new media environment will be in figuring out how to capture people's attention amid the plethora of competing options. So, the problem of digital divide has uh, received a great deal of attention in both the scholarly literature and popular press. The fear is that less privileged group in society will be left behind during the information revolution because of their impaired economic ability to access new technologies. If past research on the diffusion of media technologies served as a guide, this uh, fear is well founded, although there is already some evidence that the digital divide might be decreasing, at least in the developed countries. The new media do present opportunities for cultural studies theories with their emphasis on audience reception research, theories of how users create, interpret, and appropriate content will likely become central to the new media environment. For example, studies of fan cultures will be needed by media scholars and practitioners to understand how, in a situation of abundant choices, certain media texts can gain and hold the people's attention. Also, insights gained from these theories may help to empower those who want to use the media to subjugate the dominant ideology by offering alternative perspectives. So that is all for today. If you have any difficulties in understanding whatever I have delivered today, drop me a message in WhatsApp group and that will be addressed in the live class. Thank you so much.